Welcome to episode 25 of our Guitar Hangs. Nick Granville in Wellington, myself in Auckland, and today joining us, we've got my younger brother, Zorran. I thought he'll be a good guy to get on the show because, A, he's like one of the first people I knew that embraced amp modeling with open arms, and he's also one of the best-known metal producers in the country. So, yeah. Lovely to have you here today.
Thanks, man. Thanks for having me. It's nice to be here.
Probably, I was thinking it'll be a good idea to talk about modeling today. I've got a totally digital setup today, and so does Zorran. So I'm running, well, not totally digital. I've got a couple of analog pedals in front of an HX Stomp into an aux Stomp. And Zorran's got Two Notes Genome that has got some NAM models loaded, and we're using their cab sim. So, keeping it in the virtual world today. And I'm guessing you are running through some sort of Fractal product today?
Yeah, it's the FM9 today, so which is pretty much my setup that's always in the studio here.
Right.
Both of my amps actually live in the hallway out there because I hardly ever set them up at home.
He's had the Axe for the longest time, and I then think he added the Kempo, and he recently got rid of both of those and then, got a quad in. So he's been profiling some of his amps, and he's probably going to do some of mine as well. So
I got to say, the Quad Cortex probably has the best user interface of any of them that I've seen. Touch screen, which just makes everything easier. And I think there's like 11 switches on that. Such a small unit, They just make sense. Like the Fractal, the FM9. How many switches has it got? It's got 9 switches, and it's like way bigger than a Quad Cortex. Like it's this big. A Quad Cortex is that.
Yeah.
So I think the Quad Cortex has kind of got all that stuff figured out in terms of the profile of it. And then that little nano one is like this. Yeah. It's like a little double guitar pedal.
Yeah, that's about the size of an HX Stomp, I would think. The nano one, similar. Yeah.
They're not due until late October, they've said, which basically means November/December, but probably more likely next year.
Oh, is it?
In New Zealand.
Wow. I've got a couple of friends in India who've already got them, so yeah, so much for that.
Oh, they've been out in the States for... I know people have done reviews of them and had them for months now, so yeah, that's how it goes.
Yeah.
So you produce metal stuff, do you? Is that what you're kind of into?
Yeah.
Yes.
Your own music or other people's music, or what are you doing?
Mostly other people's music. I'd love to put some of my own music out there a bit more, but, time and energy and stuff like that. I've got 2 little ones as well, so that keeps me really busy. So, but mostly that's my day job, really, like recording.
And you're based in Auckland?
Based in Auckland, based in West Auckland.
Yeah, he's got a pretty good studio at home, which is soundproofed and everything. So he's done a fair bit of recording. I think for drums, he probably goes to one of the bigger studios in the city. Yeah, but he's quite well known in the local metal scene. One of the go-to guys. So he's done a fair bit of over the years. But he's probably done a lot more than just metal, right?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I worked with a lot of people, some country, some hip-hop, some pop,
right? Some
acoustic stuff, all sorts, really. But like 80% is metal and rock,
right?
For sure.
Yeah.
Most people do that, right? You have your specialist area, but you'll also do some other things. And sometimes there can be crossover stuff too. So with your studio, did you build the studio, or did you have someone come in and do it for you? Or are you like a real techie kind of person that gets into all that stuff as well?
Option 2 from that list. I had someone else come in and do it. But I was kind of lucky. I had a client who was also a owner of a fit-out company. Like, so he fit out offices and, and so he helped me basically turn my garage into a room within a room. And
perfect.
Yeah, it's pretty nice. Got some...
Because it's interesting because your brother is like Mr. Techie. Like, he's in there like soldering stuff on guitars, putting switches in that like nobody does. So I could just like picture you being the same, but then you're like, nah, I just got someone else to do it.
Yes. I'm nerdy about other things. Like, I love like, strings and picks and obviously amps and cabs and mics and stuff as well. So like plugins, I love my plugins.
It's interesting. Glenn was a guest on the show a couple of weeks ago. Glenn Evans, from Mr. Glenn Pickups.
Yes.
And he was saying that the metal guys were really some of the first adopters of the modeling technology.
Yes.
You know, they like right from the beginning with the people into it, and it's kind of taken the dinosaurs like myself a long time to kind of get there, you know. So I wonder why that is. Why do you think that is? Why do you think the metal guys were so embracing of it from the beginning?
I reckon because I remember Miss Sugar using the modeling stuff in like 2000-ish, maybe late 90s, 2000, early 2000s. And I reckon it's because they tuned so low that they had like the flubby low end and the modelers were so tight on the bottom end. So they could get a consistent tight bottom end when you're tuning down to B, A, nowadays G, E, like all the way down, like an octave down. So I think with the low tuning and the flubby low end, the modelers are just like flat. And I mean, I like the amp vibe. I mean, I like the sound of that. And, you know, with the Quad Cortex, I model the amps and stuff. I prefer that. I prefer that over a tight sound, but that's my theory about it, yeah.
You're probably right, actually, and then that probably started a whole thing with it, right, where people went, oh, well, if they're doing it, then we're going to do it too, and then next thing you know, before they kind of became a part of that scene. I guess, too, with the metal scene, too, to get that kind of heavy tone, you often need volume, don't you? You know, you're cranking gain, aren't you, to kind of get that, but modelers allow you to do that at a much more manageable volume, don't they? I
have another theory that also in that style you're generally hitting the front end with a more consistent level than you would if you were, you know, playing like say blues or roots music and always riding the volume.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yep.
So in that sense, you're generally going to get a more predictable result from the modeler. You know, if you're just feeding it a similar amount of gain, it'll work a lot better that way. I found, like, especially in the early days of modeling, you know, with the pod and stuff like that, the problems happened when I started turning my guitar volume way down, and, you know, the thing wasn't getting a signal that it was used to. Whereas the Cube amp is like totally like, you know, you can do it all the way, you know, down, and it'll still be, you know, able to. It doesn't work in terms of bits, so the signal level wants it. But now I found, like, especially with like this neural amp model and stuff like that, it's reacting a lot more to that volume than you know the digital stuff used to.
That's one of the big things with Fractal, that kind of one of the reasons I've gone down the Fractal road over all the others is that that's the most amp-like in terms of all that. Like even now, you can see even down.
Yeah.
It's probably better if I get a dry sound, or something like this. This has got a bit of hair on it. But if I...
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's actually responding like an amp would, and that kind of took a long time to for them to get to that point. You know what I mean? Because I remember those pods were really bad at it. You know, the old
I used
kidney
to find
bean pod.
A workaround was to boost the level into the pod with something like an RC booster or something, and then, you know, it would kind of the pedal would act like a buffer in between your guitar and the, you know, and the model.
I guess that's that consistency thing again, right? Yeah. Because the RC booster is probably compressing things
and just evening it out a little bit. Yeah, true.
Right. So you primarily play a Les Paul, or is that one of Warren's guitars?
No, that's his.
This is my one. I primarily play guitars with fixed bridges and humbuckers in them. So Les Paul.
But with do you do the 8-string, 7-string thing and all that, or not so much?
No, not really. I prefer 6, and I prefer it in like
me too.
Drop E flat, basically.
It's drop C sharp actually, right?
Yeah, drop C sharp. Yes, that's
E flat with your low E dropped. It's basically drop E down a semitone.
Right. So do you use heavier gauge strings for that then, to be able to, so it's not so loose? Or?
I used to, but now I'm basically like the lightest possible strings that stay stable. Like, so right now these are 10 to 46. So
even detuned. Wow.
And I love my Elixir strings, the green ones.
Same.
Which ones do you prefer? The OptiWeb or the
NanoWeb?
Right, so the orange ones.
Yeah.
Yes, right. And have you tried both out of interest?
I have, yeah. I because when I started with them, you could only get the NanoWeb because I had an Elixir endorsement for a little while, and it's a long story. Kind of where that's gone with, let's just say, Music Planet. No, they're cool. But
that's where I bought mine from.
So they're the distributor. So they sent me 24 sets when they first got them in there and said, you know, here's a year's worth of supply, and ongoing endorsement will just be, we'll send you 24 every year, you know.
Yeah.
So I got 24 of the nanowebs. So by the time I got through that lot, then I was like, well, then now I'm kind of stuck on that. So when I tried the other ones, they just didn't feel the same.
Right.
So because I was so used to it. And now I've actually been searching for another like brand of coated strings, because there was a while you couldn't get elixirs, which, man, I can't have that. I can't have like not being able to get strings. So I tried a few others, and actually DR sent me a bunch of strings to try and said, we've got some coated strings now. Maybe you might want to endorse these. And but I didn't like them. They didn't feel the same.
Yeah, right.
And on the other thing too is the tensions were really high. Like a set of 11 to 49 or 10 to 46 was at least felt a gauge higher, so I just couldn't do it. Yeah, right. But the green packet ones apparently are the ones that feel more like a normal string, don't they? They're less coated or something.
That is what they say on paper, but I found the green ones to be more slinky, and it's just smoother.
To be more slinky?
Yeah. So I don't know if I've got that completely wrong. I'm going to try some orange ones out this week, actually, and just make sure, but in my experience, whenever I tried the green ones, they're just like super nice to play, and yeah.
Cool. Yeah, there's something meaty about a Les Paul. I remember going and seeing the band Tool when they played in Wellington, and he had a Les Paul, and it was just like through a triple rec, and it was just glorious, you know. And then some idiot threw a bottle at the singer Maynard Ferguson, you know, and it hit him in the head. And he was so pissed off, he did the whole rest of the gig with his back to the audience. He's still saying it, but he was like, I'm not even looking at any of you motherfuckers. Like, and it was like, oh, man. And they've never come back to Wellington since. They go Auckland and they go somewhere else. And I was like, whoever threw that bottle at him was just wrecked it for us all. Because up until that point, it was incredible. It was such a mind-blowing band, you know. And but yeah, he was playing a Les Paul, a Black Beauty type Les Paul into it. It just sounded killer. Such a big sound.
Man, Tool is one of my favorite bands, and I also love A Perfect Circle, which is one of the singer's side projects. And I never really loved Tool till I saw them live. Like whenever I heard them on record,
I think I appreciated them more. Yeah, same.
Whenever I heard them on record, it was like too anemic, and it was just a bit flat, and I didn't connect with it. Maybe, you know, I even sat down and tried listening intently and stuff, but didn't connect. And then when I saw them live, it was like, oh my gosh, they're actually that tight. They're just that perfectly synced up and so tight. And that's why they sound like that on record as well, you know, just super tight. And then since then, I've, you know, come around to loving their records as well.
Yeah, same. I think I had a deeper appreciation from them seeing them. That's why I always try to get out to gigs when I can. And when I was in LA, I went out to a couple of gigs with Danny Carey, the drummer, playing jazz gigs. Because he gets out and does these, well, when I say jazz, I mean jazz fusion, you know, funky beats under jazz type stuff, you know, but he gets out and does gigs around, like he plays the Baked Potato pretty regularly.
He's got a band called Volto, I think they play there sometimes.
Yeah. I think that might have been who I saw him with. It was with this guy.
John Ziegler.
What's his name?
On guitar.
John Ziegler, yeah, it was. Now, I met John because John was hosting the jam night one night, and I was really hoping Danny Carey would be the house drummer on the jam night, but it wasn't. It was some other guy.
Okay.
And because Ben Fulton knows John.
Right.
So he kind of gave me an introduction and ended up playing a few tunes. It was kind of a bit of a weird jam night. It was a lot of some big egos in that room, you know what I mean? And I'm like, man, I don't even care. I'm like, I just don't care about... You all can show off all you want. I just want to play a few tunes and have some fun.
Yeah.
Have a drink and then go home.
That's all it's about, right?
Yeah, exactly. And what have you been up to, Warren? What's been happening?
So I thought I'd show you some digital sounds that I've got here. So this is the HX into Aux, HX Stomp into Aux Stomp. So I've got two models on this. One's the JDM 45 and one's the Soldano Crunch. So I was
going to say it sounds like your Marshall.
Yeah.
If you hadn't said, I would have thought that was your Marshall.
But I've got that big noise pedal. So if you bypass that,
which one? The trombone?
The slight return. It's basically Roger May of Voodoo One with a bass and middle that got added. So that's your JDM 45, and now this is with the big noise in. It just fattens it up a little.
Yeah.
So that's the JDM 45, and the same pedal into the Soldano Crunch. This is the TS Mini into the Soldano. And the Maxon into the Soldano. So that's more like a lead sound, and that TS Mini, that patch, I purposely dropped the volume a little bit. So you can, just play some tight rhythm behind vocals, for example, and it's not really, right in your face. And then time comes to solo, just, it becomes a bit more full bandwidth. I always found that like those rhythm distortion sounds, like especially heavy distortion sounds, I would possibly, have a little bit of the mid-range scooped out and not it be as big and full sounding, almost tighter low end as well. So that TS Mini is perfect for, that sort of thing. I mean, it bumps the high mids a little bit, but, the lows get a lot. I mean, there. Tighter. Yeah, now the slight return into the Soldano, you can actually drop the volume and get a nice clean happening. And back to the JDM 45, now you can turn the volume up a bit, you've got more headroom. I found those two preamps seem to work nicely together, different amounts of gain, but also one's a little more open and one's like a bit more focused. The Soldano's got like, more of that mid-range aggression going on. So, like for a direct sound, pretty happy with that. And I've also got a split out without the aux stomp and the chain. That'll go into the effects return of a rental amp, so at least you're pushing some air behind, and this goes to front of house. And then when you turn that amp up and down, it doesn't affect the level going to front of house.
And I guess if you're recording and you have that split, you could use that as a DI guitar channel.
Yeah, or you could put whatever IR you want later. So you should actually listen to what that Les Paul sounds like. We've got a nice sound going on in Genome. There you go.
Yeah.
There you go. Yeah, it's got that immediacy on the
front. So that's that Wizard amp, right?
That's the Wizard one. And
that reminds me of a Splawn amp, because it's not too gainy.
Right.
It's like a nice dry... But you have to like pick hard kind of thing.
Yeah.
You pick lightly.
I've never played a Spawn amp. I don't think I've ever seen one in New Zealand. I'm sure somebody's got one, but never seen one.
He's got one in his studio right now. I think his friends lent him to do profiling with.
Yeah, I've returned it.
Oh, nice.
You have?
Yeah. Okay.
They started off as, I think, modded. He started off modding Marshalls.
Right.
Then sort of started doing his own amps, and they're basically like Marshall design things, but more tailored to high gain. Like...
Kind of like Dave Friedman, where he started off modding Marshalls and...
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The exact same.
I think Mike Soldano started modding Marshalls as well. I think they all, got their start with that JCM 800.
Because to be honest, like in the 80s, 90s, and 2000s, a lot of those Marshalls weren't particularly good, were they? And people just wanted more gain out of them, or they wanted a bigger sound. They wanted it,
Yeah.
So there were a heap of people that sort of got their start doing that, didn't they? Because there were, especially around a city like LA, where there were heaps of them around, but none of them were particularly good. Yeah. So people modified them all. What's that guy? Is it Caesar
Diaz?
The mod that everyone does, Diaz?
Yep. With regards to this Genome thing, would you think it'll be holding up in a recording?
I mean, yeah.
Oh, you're okay. Now,
absolutely.
Now have a listen to this.
Super gainy.
Super gainy, yeah, you got it. Oh, that's also because You just feel like playing Metallica riffs, don't you?
Who doesn't?
Yeah. This is another useful one I found, which is the Silver Jubilee. Let's go back to that. Oh, right. Especially with the slash guitar, I think it may sound pretty nice. So this is just the amp. And this is with that GE7.
It has that little thing in the middle where it's like that little kind of push that it has. That's cool.
And this is with the Boss GE7 in front. So they've actually modded the whole chain. Check it out.
It's a bit more attack on it.
Yeah.
Gotta play the Guns N' Roses riffs, man.
Man, dude. I mean... Sure, I'm butchering it, but...
You can't play too much or we'll get a copyright strike.
Yeah.
Oh, right on.
By the way, this is something you may like. These are some dual rectifier ones I just found. So this is the red channel.
Man.
Okay. It's more gain.
What's the latency like?
What have I got at? 32
Can't
samples.
feel it?
32 samples. Minimal, right?
Yeah. It feels really good. Yeah.
This is with the TS9 in front.
The one thing with plugins is you got to be able to get that sample, which comes down to how powerful your system
is, I guess.
Yeah. Because latency is a real...
Yeah,
if you've got latency, it just feels awful.
You know, I felt latency with the Kemper out of older modelers. And that's one thing I loved about the quad. It was like nice latency. Fractal's really good too. So that's the orange mode.
Yeah.
Okay.
Does sound pretty nice, right? And
that's definitely the most amount of chugs that's been on an episode.
Yeah. It's not the same with a...
Yeah.
With a Telecaster. Sorry, it should be on bridge pickup. It's not the same, is it?
Here's my...
Yeah. That's the kind of tone where you would go.
Pretty much.
Oh, man. Classic.
But you know, the funny thing is, this guy, he grew up on like all the stuff that I was listening to at the time, which was like Def Leppard and everything. So he still probably has a, soft spot for that era as well.
Yes.
Yeah. In our family, most of like the people on my dad's side would like play an instrument, usually the guitar. And this guy, till he was like 15, he didn't play an instrument. And suddenly, like within 6 months, he picked it up and he was like killing. It was like the quickest transition I've seen. And he didn't even like learn the normal, fingering things. He would always like tune the thing down to drop D. On the acoustic guitar, he would be playing his metal riffs. And every time my dad would pick up his guitar, he'd say, "Oh shit, Zorran's tuned it down to drop D again."
But that's because it's like you've been fed that information, right? And then when you actually picked up the guitar, it's just a matter of figuring out where it is, right? And that's why it's so important with kids, I think, to play them music, expose them to music all the time and lots of different stuff so that they get that. What was it like growing up with Warren? Tell us the juicy gossip about Warren when he was a little boy.
I mean, it was cool. I mean, it was nice to be... I remember, there's so many eras, but... Okay, if we go backwards a bit, the last few years of living with Warren was like he loved cranking his amps and stuff. So he was always playing like literally 6-8 hours a day, like the entire day.
Guitar.
Yeah. And then I would be like, "Warren, turn your guitar down." And he'd be like, "No, it doesn't sound as good." And he did. So I was like, "Oh, fair enough then. That makes sense."
Yeah. And this guy, I remember when he started playing, like I would be working at the studio till like, the wee hours and trying to like crash through the morning, and he'd wake up and like be practicing Pantera riffs. So he would return the favor at some point.
So you kind of had neighbors too close if you were able to crank up amps to all hours of the morning and what have you, right?
The thing is, we lived in this building which
just didn't care.
Which was all our family. So like they were kind of sympathetic, but to a certain point, like after a while it would get to them and they would say like, can you do something about the volume or whatever. But most of the time, like, if we were like turning it up during like normal hours of the day, they wouldn't really, say much. So we kind of got away with a lot of stuff.
It's crazy to think that like bands practiced there.
Yeah.
And then, not in a non-soundproof room, and we had people in the same building not complaining.
Yeah. In fact, my granddad's brother used to live upstairs, and most of the time he would come and say like, you guys are sounding good or whatever. But one day, like, we were so loud, I think his glass of whiskey shook and it fell down, and then he really lost it.
He got mad. That's great.
Yeah. It was quite a fun time to grow up, and I think also we started, like, as we started growing up, like the technology started getting introduced,
Yeah.
So kind of almost like as stuff was coming up, we were kind of learning how to use it. I remember like getting what's that program? Not Cubase, Nuendo. Like an early version, probably version 1 or something like that. And when we figured out how to, record on a computer, that was like a huge thing.
Oh yeah.
Man, Nick, I remember when I was like maybe about 8 or 9, Warren he's like 6 years older than me. So he would have been 14 or 15. And he was like recording his band and stuff at the time. And we had like a pretty average PC, right? Maybe, I mean, it was okay, but maybe not set out for like recording and stuff. So I remember every now and then the fan of the PC, like it would just overheat. And so Warren would take out the fan, put it in the freezer to cool it down for like 5 minutes, and then put it back into the computer. And it's like, okay, now we got an hour more of recording time, basically a couple hours. And then it would overheat again, back in the freezer. And so it was cool seeing him doing all these nerdy things, obviously. Thanks to it's like 9-year-old seeing his brother record his band and stuff was cool.
So I was just going to say, isn't it so cool that you took the initiative? A lot of Kiwis are like that, right? They don't have a lot of stuff, but they kind of make do with whatever they have. The old, they used to call it the number 8 fencing wire in New Zealand because you'd use that to make anything, right? It sounds like that's what you did, right? You get an hour's recording and you just...
Yep.
You had to make it work somehow and freeze the fan until you could do some more. That's awesome.
Yeah. I think also our dad, he had heaps of musician friends, so they were always, coming over, and every, social gathering would turn into some sort of a musical event. So we kind of grew up, seeing all that stuff around, which was kind of cool. And then, seeing someone with like a brand new Gibson SG or something, and your eyes go like, like, you never even think you'd get to lay your hands on an instrument like that. And now it's like, yeah, looking back at those days, it's kind of weird.
And now you look right behind you right now, and you've got all that stuff there that you at the time couldn't even imagine having all that.
Pretty much
that kind of gear, you know what I mean, right? And same with recording, right? The idea of having to stop after an hour. Nowadays, you'd just be like, whatever. You could record for 10 hours straight if you want, like whatever. And you could run 300 plugins on your computer and it would probably cope, right?
Yep.
Whereas, I remember my first lot of recording, I used Cakewalk was the first software I got.
Yep.
It may well have fallen off the back of a truck. Let's just say that much. But that was the first software I ever used. And, if you got to 16 tracks, you were doing okay.
Yeah.
But the PC I had couldn't really handle it very well at all.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And whereas now 16, I never have to think about track count or plugins or any of that stuff.
Yeah, I think those days the recording systems used to kind of take the load off the PC because the computers weren't really, up to scratch. So you would have those Pro Tools TDM cards that did all the processing on board, and then your PC was just, handling the basic file management and stuff like that. And I remember back when we finally started getting the buffer size down to 128 samples, we were like, yeah, we can finally listen to what it kind of sounds like in borderline real time, Now we're recording video and, doing this at 32 samples, which is ridiculous.
Yeah. Crazy, isn't it?
Yeah.
And interesting too that you you know, I don't know that it necessarily makes you better, does it? Right? We've got all these options now. We can do all this stuff. I don't know that I record more music now than I did back in the day.
Yeah.
And I don't know that I necessarily record better music now than I did back in the day, because there's something about having those limits of having to work within it. And, you know, and it's an interesting thing, you know, where we're talking about modelers, you know, people have this thing where they've got 10,000 amps in there and they get this option paralysis. They don't know what to do. And so my whole thing with using the modelers is I stick to 1 or 2 amps and that's it.
Pretty much.
So what if there's 10 dumbles in there? I'm like, whatever.
Yeah. I think also the thing is the gear cycles are so quick these days. You know, like stuff's getting obsolete like in 6 months and stuff like that. So you're always kind of on the lookout for what's next. But, you know, you very rarely see like someone review a piece of gear they've had for like 5 years for something like that, you know, which they like know inside out. You know, they can get every single sound they want out of it. But, you know, that sometimes is just like you can't substitute for the amount of time you spend, you know, over time listening to it in different environments, you know, on stage, in the studio, etc. And it's
totally.
It's like, oh, this is cool. And you kind of have to figure it out in like, you know, 5 minutes or something like that.
But you, with your experience too, I remember probably when you got that katana, you probably knew straight away what it was going to do and how. And you probably within 5 minutes had its number worked out. You know what I mean? Sure, there'd be some tweaking within it, but due to your experience with amps and all your things, you kind of. So curious about that with producing the albums you do and stuff. If someone brought in a katana or something like that, and you. Do you kind of go, we're not going to use that, we're going to use this, or do you kind of try and work with what they're doing, or do you use the modelers, or do you how does it work?
Well, I mean, if they brought in a katana and it sounded great, I'd say yes, like let's do it. Or, you know, sometimes people are attached to certain pieces of gear and it helps them play the song better and stuff. So if that's the case, then by all means. But then I'll always I'll be like, okay, what about this option? Let's just plug through this and try this and A/B it and maybe do like, you know, I'll compare them, do a little blind test kind of thing, and then go, what do we reckon? And then, I mean, ultimately it's their call, but then, you know, I'll always give them some options and stuff.
Or put a mic on the katana and just track a clean DI. So you always have a backup.
I always do that as well.
Yeah. Oh, you do?
Yeah.
Great. Yeah, it's always a good idea nowadays, isn't it? And then you can reamp it with whatever amp you want. And
absolutely.
It's an interesting thing, isn't it, as a producer, because sometimes some people don't even know what a producer does. You know, you hear that often, like Rick Rubin, you know.
Yes.
Watching some things of him the other day and with Rick Beato and various people.
Yep.
And, you know, he's like, I don't play any instruments and that kind of thing. He plays a little bit of guitar.
Yes.
You know that song "No Sleep Till Brooklyn," the
Beastie Boys.
That was him playing guitar on it. I didn't know that, but so he can play a few chords and stuff. But his whole thing of being a producer is like, where's the magic in the music and sort of steering that forward. And so I was curious about that. Like, and it is interesting how people have that attachment to certain gear, isn't it? That I think sometimes that's the thing with modelers, that some people in their own mind, they think, well, if I don't have an amp, then I can't play. What, you know, Rhett Scholl might be a good example of that, of someone who's kind of pretty. I mean, he does use modelers a little bit when he has to, but his whole thing is amps. And I think it's kind of, he's decided that without an amp, it can't play. To me, it's kind of silly. It's like, man, give me anything and I'll make it work if I have to. Do you know what I mean? And I'm going to try and make a sound, and because it's down to the player, isn't it? You know what I mean? Speaking of which, I had a gig in Dunedin one time, and I rocked up, and they said, "Oh, we got a Katana 50," and I was like, "Oh, I thought you said we had a tube amp," and they said, "No, it's a tube modeling amp." Oh, all right.
Oh man.
So I could sulk about it, or just get on with it.
Yeah.
I got on with it, and the gig was fun. Actually, it worked really well. I mean, the amp wasn't the best guitar tone I've ever had, but you kind of just make it work, right?
Yeah. I was like once guesting with a friend's band in Delhi, and the only other amp they had there was this Solstate Marshall, I think MG something or the other.
Like a valve state or something.
Yeah, and they didn't even have a mic on it. They just took the line out and ran that directly into the mixer.
Oh, no.
So I was like, man, this is going to be horrendous. For some reason, it sounded great. I don't know why, what happened. It sounded great. I had a great time. I had, a ball playing with my friend's band, and what I would have normally let ruin a gig for me, it just, something happened and it just ended up sounding good. And I was like, oh, I had a good gig.
Man, nowadays, though, that's the one where I draw the line. If I see them come out to DI the guitar, I'm like, I'm refusing to play. I'm not going to play a note. And I draw the line at it because I'm like, if you think that's going to sound good, then I have zero trust in you as a sound man. Go and find a 57 or something and just put it on the amp and it'll be a million times better.
Yeah.
Although occasionally it might work out, but most of the time it's not going to. And so as soon as they want to DI anything, I'm like, different if I'm running through a model and then it's like, well, but straight out of the guitar.
I've got this hilarious story. Like the first time we ever played, second time we ever played with Zero, my first band. The rental amp was a JCM 900, okay, and I had a Boss HM2 distortion pedal. So the amp was kind of clean, and I ran some distortion from the pedal, so I could go between clean and distortion, and it sounded really nice on stage. And afterwards, my friends, they said, man, I don't know what happened, but your guitar sounded horrible on the PA. And I was like, it doesn't really compute. And then I found out what they had done. They had taken the output of my pedal into a DI box, run the DI direct, and then the parallel thing from the DI box into the amp. So the amp was just for my benefit. None of it was going across. And can you imagine a Boss HM2 going direct? So that's
the HM2 was the heavy metal.
The heavy metal, yeah.
I really liked those back in the day.
They're
like
very nice.
The orange script and stuff. Yeah. It was the closest to Metallica when I was a teenager. So I was like, that's the pedal.
So the audience bypassed the cab block.
Pretty much, yeah.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, it'd be better the other way around, right? If you had the bad tone for what you're hearing, but the audience
it sounded good outside. Yeah, so apparently that's what got me, set on this whole, getting to the bottom of like, why does it sound bad?
Sometimes you got to pick your battles too, though. I've been known to clash with a few sound people over the years, just because I'm like, if you're gonna fuck shit up, there are gonna be words. You know what I mean? Like,
who would ever take a DI out of the guitar though? Like if someone's running through an amp and they've got like, I just couldn't imagine that ever happening, Nick.
I had one sound guy putting a mic on the amp head. Not on the cabinet, on the amp head.
I've seen that.
And I'm like, you do realize there's no speakers in there? And he goes, oh no, it's like I'm going for more of an ambient tone.
All right.
Well, you can do that in your time, but I'm putting it on the speaker. So I just moved it, and I'm like, the best one I ever saw like that, there's a great jazz drummer in Wellington. He's passed away now, sadly, but Roger Sellers was his name. He taught everybody in Wellington, all the drummers all went through Roger Sellers, and I remember seeing him playing at the sound show, and he was a jazz guy, like staunch jazz guy. And the tech for the gig turned up. There's a mic on the bass drum, snare, all the toms, 2 overheads, under the hi-hat, over the hi-hat, all this sort of stuff, And Roger goes, and he played one note on his bass drum, and it went massive big sound. So he gets up from his drum kit, unplugs it, everything, and puts one overhead right in the middle, and he said, that's all you're allowed. Can't screw it up the balance if it's just one microphone. Yeah. I was like, that's great. I wouldn't have the balls to do that, but he did.
Yeah, there was another gig I was doing, and the singer, he came to me and he said, I don't know what you did, but your guitar's sounding amazing right now, like because he could hear it, coming off the PA and everything. And then I turned around and someone had kicked the mic on the cab and it was pointing like somewhere else. So the sound guy had just goosed up the gain to compensate. So it was like miking the cab from maybe 6 feet away. And I don't know, whatever.
Probably why it sounded awesome, right? Because it's not so like hard.
No
hard
fizz, no 4K in that tone.
Yeah, exactly. Man, well, we're at 47 minutes, so we probably should wrap up in a minute.
Wrapping up before the computer.
Man, it's so cool having guests. Like, when we have guests in like this, time flies. Like,
it
feels like we've only just started, and you have to come back and do this again.
Yeah,
cool. That'd be awesome.
We'll get him back.
Man.
We'll probably do some more metal-oriented stuff if the questions build up, and then we can, do a Q&A about recording heavy guitars or something like that with him.
Great idea.
If you want to boost your viewership by 1%.
Yeah. Why not?
I was also thinking we could like capture one of Warren's amps or something.
Oh, yeah. You could see how that works.
And show how to do it. That'd be awesome.
Yeah.
Kind of talk through the process. And we'd hear
yes.
all those sounds.
Nice one.
Awesome.
Anyway, thank you guys for watching, and we shall see you again. Bye-bye.